What is up, guys? Rick Hackus here, and in today's video we're going to be assessing the April update for Destiny, talking about what it did right and what it maybe could have done better. Now I'll say that this video right here is very important for the future of Destiny, and that's because assessing the April update is very important for the future of Destiny. Now why is that? Well, simply put, it's because of Destiny 2. Destiny 2 is going to come out, it's projected to come out kind of earlier 2017. We know that. That's going to be a huge step forward for the Destiny franchise. But not many people have kind of put thought into the question, okay, well, what DLC structure will Destiny 2 have? Right, we know it's going to have some sort of DLC structure. It's not just going to come out and then Destiny 2 will be the only thing until Destiny 3. That's not going to happen. It's going to have DLC, but is it going to have paid expansions like Destiny 1 did at the very beginning? Is it only going to have big expansions like the Taken King, and then in between the time it takes for those big expansions to come out, is it going to have live updates? Or is it going to be purely funded with microtransactions and have only live updates? This question we don't exactly know the answer to, but we do know that because of this, because Destiny 2 could very well be relying on live updates to keep us Destiny players interested, it's very important to assess the April update, which is kind of like the big kahuna when talking about live updates. The April update is really the pinnacle of what live updates should really be. So again, it's very important to assess and tell Bungie what they did right and what they could have done better, because this is going to directly impact Destiny 2 potentially, depending on, again, if they are still going to be using these live updates as a form of DLC. Now let's start off by talking about what the April update did right, and it actually did do a lot of things right. The first thing is that I honestly think that the state of the game within Destiny right now is one of potentially the best it's ever been, simply because there is so much stuff to do right now. That's because everything has been made viable to get to the end game. For goodness sakes, you can go into King's Fall Hard, and the hard mode gear is dropping up to 335. You can do Challenge of the Elders, and that gear is obviously dropping 335, going for the high score or the 90,000 points overall to get rewards from Variks, or you can just simply do it and you can actually get rewards at the end. For example, you can get the Year 2 Drake's Promise and the Lord of Wolves and the Queenbreaker's Bow just kind of for completing Challenge of the Elders. You don't even have to be involved with the scores. On top of that, the Court of Oryx is dropping 335 artifacts. On top of that, you can even just do strikes. This is one of the best additions because a lot of those things that I mentioned, and actually in PvP, there's all these drops as well. The Iron Banner stuff, the Trials of Osiris stuff, that's all dropping 335, so PvP is very viable. And again, going back to strikes, all of that stuff I've mentioned, you kind of really need a group to do it with. I mean, you could play PvP by yourself, I suppose, but for a lot of that stuff, the raid, Challenge of the Elders, you're going to need a group to get together to do that. But a lot of people don't have access to that. A lot of people don't have friends lists with thousands of people on it, and so they are looking for something that they can do solo, and that's why it's so important that strikes have been increased. That strikes, just by playing strikes, which you can easily do by yourself, getting that strike exclusive loot, that can be a very high light level and propel you into the end game. And as a result of all of this, for the first time in a long time, you're actually sitting there in orbit in Destiny, and the biggest problem is deciding what to do, and that is an awesome, awesome feeling. And I am extremely happy by this because I have been fighting for this state of the game for a long time. That's why I'm such a huge proponent of updating the old raids. If you think right now that there's a lot of stuff to do, imagine if there was 2 more raids that you could do as well. This feeling of having so much stuff to do, of having so much content relevant, would be increased tenfold with all of the raids being made relevant. Now that's a different argument, but again, it's the same principle of having all of this content relevant in the end game. And funny enough, basically the April update was an experiment that succeeded. When people were asking for more diversity, for more relevant content, there was a definite amount of pushback. People saying that no, that's going to take away from the newest content. If you can just go back and play the old raid or just play strikes or whatever, that's going to take away from the new content. It won't be as important. Turns out that's absolutely not the case. Those people are dead wrong. And again, the state of the game, because all of this content has been made relevant, it's been proven that that is generally a good thing. Like 99% of players are happy with the state of the game right now because of so much relevant content. And making sure to not put too much emphasis on the new content, on the challenge of elders like the remade Prison of Elders is also a good thing. If that was the only way to get to 335, it would be judged a lot more harshly, and I think it would get much more boring much more quickly. Another thing that the April update definitely did right is it gave us a lot of things to work for. It gave us a lot of rewards and loot to go for within the game. Remaking a bunch of Year 1 exotics, even putting, again, the old Prison of Elders exotics as drops for Challenge of Elders, that was a great idea. On top of that, they just introduced a bunch of new weapons, like the Queen's weapons, and the Fallen weapons you get from leveling up Variks. And speaking of leveling things up, it was a fantastic idea to add some of the old Year 1 weapons like the Shatter Price, like the LDR, into the loot table for the rewards for leveling up your Crucible Quartermaster and your Vanguard Quartermaster. Like, this is all great because there's a lot of stuff to go for. I want an LDR, obviously, but I also want some of the Queen's weapons. I also want some of the remade exotics. I want a lot of the loot that's being offered. I want that stupid Taken shotgun as a strike drop. I want a bunch of stuff because a bunch of stuff that's worth going for has been added into the game as loot. That's all fantastic. And this does naturally bring us to Sterling Treasure. In one aspect, it is kind of part of the good, adding a bunch of new, really desirable armor sets that are awarded through these Sterling Treasure packs, and also the Chroma Shaders, which was also just a new aspect of customization, another desirable piece of loot that people are going for. That's all great, like logging in once a week to go and get your Sterling Treasure, to try to get those armor pieces completed, that's fantastic. The problem, of course, is with them allowing you to buy the Sterling Treasure packs. Now, I'm really not going to get too into it in this video because I made a whole video about the Sterling Treasure packs, but I really just don't like them. I do feel that it's kind of pay to win, not for the armor. Everyone gets all jumpy when I say that, and they say, oh, the armor's, rank 3, it's not pay to win. I know the armor, well, we're going to talk about that because firstly, it's more than armor. You can actually get the faction rep boosters, so someone who just buys a bunch of the Sterling Treasures is going to have more faction rep boosters and is going to get ahead of someone who hasn't bought a bunch. So that's a little unfair. But you talk about what's pay to win in Destiny. Like, what is winning in Destiny? Has everyone ever thought about that? What makes you win in Destiny? Is it winning a Crucible match? Because if you honestly think about it, what brought you more joy? What made you have a bigger feeling of accomplishment in Destiny? When you won a Crucible match, or when you got your first Gjallarhorn? And I think for most people, it's going to be the Gjallarhorn answer. For everyone, pretty much, it's going to be the Gjallarhorn answer, because winning in Destiny isn't winning a Crucible match. It's getting loot. Like, winning in Destiny is getting the most desirable loot, right? That's actually the goal, basically, for a lot of people, is to get the best loot, to complete their collections, to have the best stuff. And that is a totally reasonable way of looking at winning in a loot-based game. So when you add more loot, desirable loot, with these, the Taken armor set and the Spectre armor set, completing that armor set could be seen as winning. And so basically being able to buy that is pay to win. Now, of course, if you disagree with me, that's fine, and I'm not saying that, Sterling Treasure is going to end Destiny or anything. I don't think it's that bad, but the point I'm trying to make is that people look at winning differently, and in Destiny, I think a lot of people actually, if you kind of reconsider it and you actually look at it logically, winning in Destiny is getting the best loot. So having access to just buy the best loot, that's pay to win. And I don't think many people have made that argument. Now, keeping on the topic of loot, another thing that they could have done better is that they did add a bunch of desirable loot. That's definitely good, and it's more good than bad. But there is something that they could have, again, done better, and that is add more diversified loot. The problem with the loot in Destiny, I've made a whole video talking about how, like, Destiny's broken gun system is the biggest problem with the game, and I absolutely believe that. The problem with the loot system is that you have all of these weapons in the same exact damage archetype. If you guys don't believe me, I always say this, go to a database, go to like the Planet Destiny database, go to the weapons, and like assault rifles or whatever type of weapon, and then just sort by damage, like sort by impact or sort by rate of fire, and it's the most depressing thing you'll ever see. If you're a Destiny fan, you'll just see the same numbers pop up again and again and again and again. That's because everything falls into these same damage archetypes. And because of that, as Destiny gets older, it's getting harder and harder to make desirable loot. Like if you have this new crazy Iron Banner assault rifle that does the exact same rate of fire and the exact same damage as, you know, the Suros ARI-45. Well, you already have a good roll on your Suros ARI-45, so why would you go after this loot? And that's happening more and more and more. Again, everything fits into these same damage archetypes, and the only reason kind of the gun system is held afloat and is diversified is because of the exotics. And unfortunately, this is made worse by perks. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but essentially because of the perks are so catastrophically unbalanced, and it doesn't take a genius to see this. You know, if you have something like Exhumed, the perk Exhumed where you get, you know, better handling once you're revived or something, that has absolutely no possible way it's going to compete with something like Headseeker. Like, it's so far out of the ballpark. They are so different in power level that you have these perks, Headseeker, Full Auto, Counterbalance, you know, Hidden Hand, that are very, very good, and then you have all of the other perks that are okay at best. And because of this, everyone on every type of gun is looking for basically the exact same rolls. And so you have these guns that are doing the exact same damage and rate of fire, and they're made even more similar because they all now have the same perks, because this, you know, there's only a few subset of perks that are actually good. And therefore, I am definitely disappointed that of all of the new weapons and armor that was added into the game, we don't have any new perks and we don't have any new archetypes. Now, of course, the argument to this is, well, this is just a live update, and heck, it's free, and that is a good argument until you, again, look at the fact that, okay, well, if they're doing live updates again for Destiny 2, what would you rather have? Would you rather have, like, everything's being the same, or would you rather have new perks and new diverse weapons with these live updates? And I think if you look at it in that aspect, if you look at it, you know, looking forward into the future, talking about what you'd like your future live updates to be, I think that it is a reasonable thing to say, add a few more perks into the weapon systems, and also maybe diversify the weapons in terms of damage archetypes. That is definitely going to be a huge factor when it comes to future live updates down the road in Destiny and Destiny 2. Now, I talked about some negative things, but let's actually shift back and talk about positive things, because I think that the leveling in the April update, the way that leveling works now, is fantastic. It's probably the best that it's ever been in all of Destiny. And the reason being is because when the light levels were added, it was some good and some bad. The good is that it added kind of a buffer zone for players. Like if you were one level less, for those of you who don't know who maybe are new to Destiny, if you were one level less when you were versing an enemy, like if they were 33 and you were 32, you would do like 30% of the damage. It was like 1/3. I think it might have even been up to 40%, like less damage you dealt to them and 40% more damage they dealt to you. It was absurd how insane the level differences are, and that made it so that if you didn't get to that max level as quickly as possible, if you were one level behind, you were at a huge disadvantage. Now, because of light levels added, the good is that it adds a buffer zone. You can be a little bit less on the light level and it won't be absolutely catastrophic. The bad part is that it adds even more RNG. You're just trying to get those, you know, good light level rolls. Before the April update, for goodness sakes, you could go into a hard mode raid and come out with not one single light level lowered because all of the loot you got was bad, and it's just adding, again, another layer of RNG. Thankfully, though, the April update kind of addressed this, because now when you get a new piece of loot, it's actually almost always going to be a little higher than your current light level, but only by a little bit. Like it can only actually get to 5 light levels above what your current displayed light level is. And this results in a much, much better system, because although it is a little RNG, and then sometimes you get loot that's only like 1 light level above what you are, and then it doesn't advance your light very much, but again, it's always going to advance it pretty much by a little bit. It's just slow advancement, but it is constant advancement. The days are over where you'd go into an activity and come out with completely lower light gear, and you wouldn't advance that light level at all. Now, at the April update, that's almost impossible. You're always going to come out a little higher in light level than what you went in with, and that is definitely the better system. And I really hope that when they add the next large expansion later in fall 2016, which has been announced for Destiny, that they keep this kind of light system leveling, that they keep the slow, constant progression, and don't go back to a wildly RNG-based system. So again, the leveling system right now is fantastic, and I hope they keep it the way it is for when the next expansion comes out, and in Destiny 2. And lastly, I wanted to talk about the big kind of, I guess, new addition into Destiny, which is the remade Prison of Elders with the April update. Now overall, I do have to say that I am enjoying the new Prison of Elders. If I had to rate it, I would rate it something like a 7 out of 10. It's above average, like decently above average. However, there are definitely some things that could do better. Now I made a video, addressing the fact that so many people were saying that it's too easy, and that's the biggest problem. It's too easy. Unfortunately, everyone decided to dislike and make comments before they actually watched the video, and I know this because so many comments were talking about stuff that I talked about in the video, but I digress. Basically, my point is this. I do feel that it may be a little too easy. I don't have any sort of problem with it being easy in general. I think that there's a lot of casual players, and they're actually really enjoying Challenge of the Elders because it's not super sweaty and super challenging like hard mode raid is for many people. However, the problem I have with Challenge of the Elders is that you just have to do it, so many times. Like, think about, just to, properly do it, one of the rewards is to get 90,000 points, which for the majority of people is going to be 3 playthroughs. So if you have 3 characters, which a lot of people do, I do, that is 9 times per week you're playing this exact same thing, and that's where we kind of have a problem. Why the Challenge of the Elders is considered so easy is because not the boss fights are actually pretty decent. It's because while you're fighting the boss, guys, there's only 2 types of red health enemies. Like if you're in the Vex Arena, there's goblins and hobgoblins, or taken goblins, taken hobgoblins, and that is it. Really? Taken hobgoblins and goblins, and they're only red health? That's your end game content? The problem with that is not that it's too easy, it's that it gets kind of boring. Once you're doing it for the 5th time plus, you are just fighting these basic red health enemies, droning along, and it's not that fun. My solution to this is adding a little bit of randomization that comes within the weeks. Let's talk about the Vex Arena. All I really want, my solution to this, is that if you're in the Vex Arena, you should have, let's say, 3 red health Minotaurs that randomly spawn when reinforcements arrive. So maybe one spawns round 1 when the first wave of ads spawns. Maybe 2 more spawn round 3. Maybe they all spawn round 1 and charge at you at the same time. Guys, red health Minotaurs are not that challenging to deal with. You should be able to deal with a red health Minotaur, for God's sakes, in the end game content. That's not going to make it hard, that's going to make it interesting, because again, they're randomly spawning on a random wave. They could all charge you round 1, or maybe they're spread out through all the rounds, but that's gonna make each time you play it for that 1 week a little different, and that's what I really want. Add some diversity, add some randomization to the times you play it within the same week, and I think that would really improve the Challenge of the Elders. But again, that's just what I feel that it could do better. I still think that overall, I do enjoy the Challenge of the Elders, and I do enjoy that it's kind of easier. You don't have to sweat your nuts off, as opposed to doing a hard mode raid. And I like that you can only do it with 3 people, whereas the raid is 6 people, so it's definitely easier if there's not a lot of people on your friends list, so that's all good things. So, in summary, I think that the April update as a whole was a great addition to Destiny. It added a ton of positive things, making all the content relevant, adding a bunch of loot to go for, and lastly, making the leveling system finally a good one. The things it could have done better, and the things I would recommend for the next hypothetical live update coming to Destiny or even Destiny 2, is that you still need to add some diversity within the loot system with each of the updates. You must add some new perks, maybe some new damage archetypes, and more than 1 new exotic that's only exclusive to the PlayStation, so Xbox players don't even get it, which is bullshit. You have to do a little bit more than that when you're talking about live updates. And the reason being is that I think it's unreasonable to rely on the large expansions to add that stuff. The Taken King added that stuff, and the next expansion coming out later in 2016, hypothetically, is going to add that stuff, new perks and stuff, but it's been over a year, since those 2 things have come out. So waiting an entire year before we can get some new weapon perks, that is not a good idea. Now that's it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, and if you agree with what I'm saying, please remember to spread the word by simply rating or sharing this video. Now if you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter. That's linked in the description down below, as is my Twitch channel, which you can also follow. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.